Captain Jake Morrison stared out the viewport of his salvage ship, watching the debris field spin slowly in the black emptiness of space. Chunks of metal floated past, some as small as his fist, others as large as a house. This was his job now. This was what humanity had become in the 30 years since they joined the Galactic Coalition. Scavengers, bottom feeders, collectors of alien garbage. The Resilience was not much to look at. She was a patchwork vessel, built from parts that 3 different alien species had thrown away. Her hull was scarred and dented. Her engines made a grinding noise that Ben Carter, the ship's engineer, swore was normal. But she flew, and she kept Jake and his crew alive, and that was more than many humans could say out here on the edge of Coalition space. Lisa Brennan sat at the sensor station, her fingers dancing across the controls. She had been with Jake for 5 years now, ever since they both left Earth to find work among the stars. "Getting some interesting readings from Sector 7, she said without looking up. "Big stuff. Multiple signatures." Jake nodded and turned to the pilot's chair, where Amy Rodriguez was already adjusting their course. Amy was young, barely 25, but she could fly the Resilience better than anyone Jake had ever seen. She had grown up on a colony ship, learning to navigate by feel as much as by instruments. "Ben, you awake down there?" Jake called into the ship's intercom. A grunt came back through the speaker, followed by Ben's tired voice. "I'm always awake, Captain. Sleep is for people whose ships don't fall apart every 5 minutes." Jake smiled despite himself. Ben complained constantly. But the man was a genius with alien technology. He could make systems work together that were never meant to touch each other. It was a skill that every human engineer had to learn these days. The Coalition gave humanity their old equipment, their outdated ships, their broken tools. They gave humanity scraps and expected gratitude. The Etherians had been generous, or so they said. They provided jump drives that were only 3 generations behind their current models. The Krogar Dominion donated weapon platforms they no longer wanted, systems too weak for modern warfare. The Vex Collective handed over mining equipment their automated drones had replaced decades ago. To the Coalition species, these were charitable gifts. To help an emerging race, to humans like Jake, it was like being handed garbage and told to be thankful. But humans learned. They learned fast. When you only have broken pieces, you learn how to fix them. When nothing fits together properly, you learn how to make it fit. When the instruction manuals are written in 6 different alien languages, you learn to figure things out yourself. The Resilience moved closer to the debris field, and Jake felt his pulse quicken. This was different from their usual finds. Most salvage operations turned up a broken satellite or an abandoned mining drone. This was the wreckage of a battle. He could see pieces of Etherian ships, their elegant curves now twisted and torn. Krogar armor plating floated alongside Vex computer cores, still blinking with faint lights. "What happened here?" Amy whispered, her hands steady on the controls but her voice uncertain. "A fight," Lisa said, studying her screens. "A bad one. Multiple species engaged, but I'm not seeing any debris that matches Coalition victory patterns." This was a retreat. Jake understood what she meant. Coalition fleets were powerful and organized. When they won battles, the debris fields looked a certain way. Clean. Organized. This was chaos. Something had hurt the Coalition badly enough that they ran, leaving everything behind. "Are we salvaging or leaving?" Ben's voice came through the intercom again. Jake made his decision quickly. "We're salvaging. Lisa, scan for anything dangerous. Amy, take us in slow. Ben, get ready to receive cargo." For the next 6 hours, they worked. The Resilience's cargo bay filled with pieces of technology that Jake barely understood. Etherian shield generators, still intact, despite the damage to the ships they came from. Krogar weapon systems, their power cells drained but their firing mechanisms perfect. Vex processing cores that Ben said were worth a year's salary each. But the most interesting discovery came near the end of their operation. Amy guided the ship toward a cluster of larger debris, and Lisa's sensors went crazy. 3 intact systems, floating together as if they had been carefully placed. An Etherian power matrix. A Krogar targeting computer. A Vex control interface. That's not possible, Ben said when he came up to the bridge to look. Those systems can't work together. Different power requirements, different programming languages, different everything. Jake looked at the 3 pieces of technology floating in space. The Coalition never mixed their systems. Each species built their equipment to work only with their own designs. It ensured that everyone stayed dependent on their own manufacturers, their own suppliers. You couldn't just plug an Etherian engine into a Krogar ship. The systems rejected each other, but what if someone found a way? Bring it all aboard, Jake ordered. Everything we can fit. They filled the cargo bay until the Resilience groaned under the weight. Then they plotted a course for New Providence Station, the human frontier outpost where Commander Patricia Hayes oversaw what passed for humanity's military fleet. It was a 10-day journey through Coalition space, and Jake spent most of it in the cargo bay with Ben, examining their finds. Ben's excitement grew with each passing day. "Look at this," he would say, holding up a component. "The Etherians designed this to be beautiful, not efficient. All these curves and crystals. But underneath, it's just power conversion. We could strip out half this stuff and it would work better." Jake understood what his engineer was thinking. Humanity had spent 30 years learning to work with incompatible systems. They had no choice. Every ship, every station, every tool was a mixture of human ingenuity and alien cast-offs. Where Coalition species saw purity and specialization, humans saw opportunity. When the Resilience finally docked at New Providence Station, Jake requested an immediate meeting with Commander Hayes. Patricia was a tall woman in her 50s, with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. She listened to Jake's report without interrupting, then followed him down to the cargo bay to see what they had brought. She walked among the salvaged equipment in silence, her face unreadable. Finally, she turned to Jake and Ben. "You're thinking what I think you're thinking. We could build something," Ben said eagerly. "Something new." The New Providence Station buzzed with activity in the weeks following the Resilience's return. Commander Patricia Hayes had assembled a team of the best engineers humanity had to offer, though best was a relative term. These were not people who had trained at prestigious Coalition academies. They were mechanics who had learned by doing, tinkerers who had spent years making broken alien equipment function again. Ben Carter stood in the center of the station's largest hangar bay, surrounded by chaos. The salvaged components from the debris field lay scattered across the floor in organized piles. Etherian technology glowed with soft blue light. Krogar equipment was dark and heavy, built for war. Vex systems hummed with quantum processors that hurt to look at too long. Maria Santos approached him, wiping grease from her hands. She was a power systems specialist who had kept a failing colony reactor running for 3 years past its expected lifespan. "I've been looking at the Etherian matrix," she said. "It's beautiful, but it's also incredibly wasteful. They design for elegance, not efficiency." "Can you make it work with our fusion cores?" Ben asked. Maria shrugged. "Maybe. Probably. I'll need to rebuild half the interface systems. But yes. The real question is whether we can power everything at once." That was the core problem they faced. Coalition ships were designed with massive reactors that could run all systems simultaneously. Human reactors were smaller, less advanced. They could not match that kind of output. A standard Coalition warship could fire weapons, maintain shields, and run sensors all at full power. If humans tried that, their reactor would melt down in minutes. Kevin Park joined them, a tablet in his hands showing weapon system diagrams. He was young, barely 30, but he had worked on every type of alien weapon that humans had managed to acquire. "The Krogar plasma cannons are monsters," he said with obvious admiration. "They can punch through almost any shield. But the power draw is insane." "How insane?" Ben asked. "Fire one shot at full power, and we'd drain 20% of our reactor output," Kevin replied. Fire all 6 that we salvaged, and we'd be dead in space. Ben rubbed his tired eyes. They had been working for 3 weeks straight, barely sleeping. Every solution they found created 2 new problems. The Etherian shields needed power in a steady flow. The Krogar weapons needed sudden massive bursts. The Vex targeting systems operated on principles that human sensors could not directly read. Nothing was designed to work together. Sophie Zhang wandered over, her neural interface headset still attached to her temples. She was humanity's leading expert in alien-human technology translation, and she looked as exhausted as Ben felt. "I think I have something," she said quietly. "A way to control all these systems without drowning in interface lag." She explained her idea using simple diagrams on her tablet. Instead of using traditional controls where a captain gave orders and the crew executed them, she proposed a direct neural link. The ship's captain would think their commands, and the systems would respond instantly. It would be exhausting, maybe even dangerous, but it would eliminate the delay between decision and action. "In battle, milliseconds matter," Sophie said. "Coalition ships have faster computers," unquote. End quote. "But they still need time to process commands through their hierarchy. A captain thinks, then speaks, then the crew acts, then the systems respond. We could cut all that out." Ben liked the idea, but he saw the problems. It would put enormous stress on whoever uses it. And if they make a mistake at that speed, there's no time to correct it. "I know," Sophie agreed. "But it might be our only advantage." Maria had been listening quietly. Now she spoke up. "I have an idea for the power problem. What if we don't try to run everything at once? What if we build a system that redirects power dynamically based on what we need?" Ben turned to her. "Explain." "Coalition ships have dedicated power lines for each system," Maria said, her hands moving as she talked. "Weapons get their own reactor output. Shields get theirs. Sensors get theirs. Everything is separate and specialized. But what if we feed everything into a central capacitor bank? The ship's reactor charges the capacitors. And then we can redirect that power wherever we need it. Whenever we need it." "That's inefficient," Kevin pointed out. "You lose energy in the transfer." "Yes," Maria agreed. "But it gives us flexibility. In battle, we could dump all power into shields when we're under fire, then switch it all to weapons when we attack. We'd be vulnerable during the switch, but we'd hit much harder than our size suggests." Ben thought about it. Coalition doctrine emphasized steady, sustained combat. Their ships could fight for hours, maintaining constant output. What Maria proposed was the opposite. Burst fighting, hit hard, defend hard, but never both at the same time. It was risky and inefficient, but it might work. Over the following months, the team built something that should not exist. They took a damaged human transport ship as their base, a vessel that had been scheduled for scrap. Its hull was solid enough, though scarred by years of use. They stripped out everything inside and started fresh. The Etherian power matrix went in first, modified by Maria until it could interface with human fusion cores. The installation took 6 weeks and failed 4 times before she found a configuration that worked. The Krogar weapons came next, mounted in positions that made coalition military engineers sick to look at. No symmetry, no elegance. Just 6 plasma cannons placed wherever they could fit and had clear firing lines. The Vex targeting computer was the hardest piece. Its quantum processors operated on principles that seemed to violate causality. Kevin spent weeks just trying to understand how it worked, let alone how to connect it to human sensors. In the end, he gave up trying to understand it completely. He just built interfaces until he found combinations that produced useful results. Sophie's neural command system went into the captain's chair, a web of delicate connections that made Ben nervous every time he looked at it. She tested it herself first, connecting her mind to the incomplete ship's systems. She said it felt like trying to control 6 bodies at once, each with different reflexes. It gave her migraines that lasted for days. The ship took shape slowly, and with each week it looked less like a proper vessel and more like a sculpture of desperation. The hull showed 3 different types of metal where they had patched damage. The weapons stuck out at odd angles. The shield generators hummed at different frequencies, creating a discordant sound that echoed through the hangar. Exposed conduits ran along the outside because there was no room inside for all the power systems Maria had installed. Jake visited regularly, watching the progress with a mixture of pride and worry. "It's ugly," he said to Ben one day. "It's perfect," Ben replied with a tired grin. Commander Hayes came by less often, but when she did, she stayed longer. She understood what this project meant. Officially, this was just an experiment to test salvaged equipment. Unofficially, it was humanity's attempt to prove they were more than scavengers. More than the grateful recipients of coalition charity. The question of what to name the ship sparked debate among the crew. Someone suggested calling it Frankenstein, after the old Earth story of something built from pieces. Someone else wanted Mosaic. Jake listened to the suggestions and then made his choice. "We'll call her Defiance," he said simply. The Defiance's first flight was not going according to plan. The ship shuddered as Jake eased power to the engines. And somewhere below the bridge, something made a sound like metal screaming. Ben's voice came through the intercom immediately. Calm despite the noise. "That's normal, Captain. Probably normal." Jake glanced at Lisa, who was monitoring every system from her station. She gave him a tight smile. "All readings are in acceptable ranges." Ben's definition of acceptable, anyway. Amy sat at the pilot's controls, her hands moving with practiced ease despite this being her first time flying anything like the Defiance. The ship responded differently than the Resilience. Faster, more aggressive, like it wanted to fight. They had been testing systems for 3 hours, running through checklists that Ben and Sophie had prepared. The power distribution worked, though Maria's capacitor system made the lights flicker every time they switched configurations. The weapons were untested, but Kevin reported all 6 cannons showed green on his board. The shields came online with a hum that hurt Jake's teeth. Sophie's neural interface sat dormant in the command chair. Jake had not tried it yet. The thought of connecting his mind directly to the ship felt wrong somehow. Too intimate. Too dangerous. But Sophie insisted they would need it in real combat. Human reflexes were fast, but thought was faster. The communication system crackled to life. "Defiance. This is New Providence Control. We're receiving a distress call from Tellurian Mining Colony 7. They're under attack." Jake straightened in his chair. "Patch it through." The voice that came through was panicked, high-pitched. The Tellurians were a peaceful species, one of the Coalition's smaller members. They operated mining colonies throughout this sector, pulling valuable minerals from dead worlds. They had no military, no weapons. They relied on Coalition protection. "This is Colony 7. We are under attack by unknown vessels. Our defense grid is failing. We have 1,500 civilians. Please, someone help us." Lisa pulled up the colony's location. "It's 2 hours away at maximum speed. Coalition response time from the nearest base would be 5 hours minimum." Jake did not hesitate. "Amy, plot a jump. Best possible speed." "Captain," Lisa said carefully, "we haven't tested the jump drive. We haven't tested the weapons. We don't even know if the shields will hold under fire." "I know," Jake replied. "But those are real people dying. Contact Commander Hayes. Tell her where we're going." The Defiance jumped, and reality twisted around them in ways that made Jake's stomach turn. Etherian jump technology was elegant when it worked properly. In their hybrid ship, it felt like being pulled through a pipe too small for your body. The journey that should have taken 2 hours passed in 37 minutes of uncomfortable velocity. They dropped out of jump space near the colony and immediately saw the battle. 3 ships circled the mining facility like predators. They were sleek and black, with lines that looked organic rather than mechanical. Ravagers. Jake had heard of them but never seen them. They were raiders from beyond Coalition space, pirates who attacked weak targets and vanished before military forces could respond. The colony's defense grid sparkled weakly, a shield that was failing section by section. As they watched, one section collapsed entirely, and a Ravager ship fired a bright green beam that tore through the facility's outer hull. "Battle stations," Jake ordered. Then he took a breath and lowered himself into the neural interface headset. "Sophie. Guide me through the connection." Sophie's voice came through, calm and steady. "Relax your mind. Don't fight it. Let the ship in." The connection hit him like a wave. Suddenly, he was not just sitting in the chair. He was the ship. He felt the reactor's pulse like a heartbeat. The shields were his skin. The weapons were his fists. It was overwhelming and terrifying and exhilarating all at once. "All systems at your thought," Sophie said. "Try something small first." Jake thought about the forward scanner, and it activated instantly. He thought about increasing power to the engines, and he felt the acceleration in his bones. It worked. It actually worked. "Incoming," Amy warned. One of the Ravager ships had detected them and was turning to engage. Jake did not think about what to do next. He just did it. Power flowed to forward shields as he angled the Defiance toward the enemy. The Ravager fired, and green energy splashed across their defensive barrier. Jake felt it like pressure against his chest. The shields held, but barely. Maria's calculations had been optimistic. "Return fire," Jake thought. And Kevin's targeting system translated his intent into action. 3 of their plasma cannons fired simultaneously, red bolts that crossed space in an instant. The Ravager's shields absorbed the hits easily, rippling like water. "Their shields are rotating frequencies," Kevin called out. "They're adapting to our weapons." Jake processed that information through the neural link. The Ravagers had technology that learned from attacks. Fire the same weapon repeatedly, and it would become less effective. It was brilliant defense against standard coalition tactics, where ships specialized in one weapon type, but the Defiance was not standard. Jake switched power distribution, pulling energy from the shields and dumping it into weapons. He felt vulnerable, exposed, but he needed more firepower. He fired again, but this time he mixed the attack. Plasma cannons from the Krogar systems, followed immediately by kinetic rounds that Ben had installed from human military stock. Then, electromagnetic pulses from modified Vex technology. The Ravager's shields flickered, confused by the rapid changes. One kinetic round punched through, tearing a gash in the enemy's hull. The ship veered away, trailing atmosphere. "They're not used to mixed attacks," Lisa said, excitement in her voice. "Coalition ships all use one type of weapon. They don't know how to adapt to rapid changes." The other 2 Ravager ships were converging now, abandoning their attack on the colony to deal with this new threat. Jake felt the pressure of multiple targeting locks on the Defiance. This was going to hurt. "Amy, I need you to fly like you've never flown before," he said. "Already on it, Captain." What followed was chaos. Amy threw the Defiance through maneuvers that no coalition pilot would attempt. She flew without pattern, without predictability. The ship twisted and spun, and Jake felt every motion through the neural link. It was like dancing and fighting at the same time. The Ravagers fired in coordinated patterns, trying to trap the Defiance in overlapping fields of fire. Jake distributed power frantically, shields up to block one attack, then down to redirect energy to weapons for a counterattack, then back to engines for a sudden acceleration that left one enemy shooting at empty space. Ben's voice came through the intercom, strained. "Captain, we're redlining everything. The power distribution system was not designed for this much switching." "How long can we hold?" Jake asked. "Unknown. Maybe 5 minutes, maybe 5 seconds." Jake made a decision born of desperation. He dumped all power from shields and engines into weapons, leaving them vulnerable, but giving Kevin enough energy for a full broadside. All 6 plasma cannons fired at once, concentrated on a single Ravager ship. The enemy's adaptive shields could not handle the overwhelming burst. They collapsed, and the plasma tore through armor and hull and reactor. The Ravager exploded in a sphere of white light, but the Defiance was defenseless now, coasting on momentum with no shields and depleted weapon capacitors. The remaining 2 Ravagers recognized the opening and moved to capitalize. Jake felt their targeting locks like crosshairs on his back. Then something unexpected happened. The colony, which had been silent and helpless, fired. Not with military weapons, but with mining lasers and industrial equipment. The beams were weak, almost pathetic compared to real weapons. But they struck at the same moment the Ravagers were focused on the Defiance. One Ravager took a mining laser to its engine section. The damage was minimal, but it broke their attack formation. That moment of disruption was enough. Maria's capacitors finished recharging. Jake brought shields back online, and Amy threw the ship into a wild spin that put them behind one of the Ravagers. At point-blank range, Jake fired the kinetic cannons. The solid rounds punched through the Ravager's weak rear shielding and crippled their drive systems. The last Ravager broke off, streaming away at high speed. It had seen enough. 2 ships destroyed, 1 crippled. And this strange human vessel was still fighting. Whatever the Ravagers had expected when they attacked a defenseless mining colony, it was not this. Jake disconnected from the neural interface and immediately felt exhausted. His head pounded and his hands shook. The bridge was a mess of warning lights and alert sounds. Amy slumped in her chair, breathing hard. Lisa was already working on damage reports, her face pale. "Ben," Jake called. "Tell me we can make it back to the station." There was a long pause before Ben replied. "We can make it. Barely. But Captain, this ship is held together by hope and spite right now. We need repairs, major repairs." Coalition's central station hung in space like a jewel. It was massive beyond anything Jake had ever seen. A structure built over thousands of years by dozens of species working together. Elegant spires reached out from the central hub, each one belonging to a different member race. At its heart was the Grand Assembly Chamber, where the Coalition's future was decided. The Defiance looked pitiful next to the gleaming warships docked around the station. Etherian cruisers with their flowing organic curves, Krogar battleships that bristled with weapons, Vex science vessels covered in sensor arrays, and then there was the human ship, ugly and asymmetrical, its hull showing obvious signs of recent battle damage. Jake stood before the Grand Assembly with Lisa beside him. Ben and Amy were back on the ship, making repairs that would never truly be finished. Sophie had stayed at New Providence Station, her neural interface work too valuable to risk. Commander Hayes had come with them, but was not allowed in the chamber during the inquiry. This was for Jake to face alone. The chamber was circular and vast. Representatives from every Coalition species sat in their designated sections, hundreds of beings watching, the 2 humans standing in the center. At the highest point sat the council members, who held the most power. Jake recognized Councillor Varen of the Etherians. The being was tall and elegant, with skin that seemed to shimmer with inner light. "Captain Morrison?" Varen's voice was musical, but there was steel beneath the beauty. "You stand accused of violating salvage protocols, constructing unauthorized military hardware, and operating outside established chain of command. How do you answer these charges?" Jake had prepared for this moment during the 3-day journey. He had practiced speeches in his head, careful arguments about technicalities and legal gray areas. But now, standing here surrounded by species who thought humans were inferior, he decided on simple honesty. "We built a ship from parts you threw away," Jake said clearly. "We saved lives that would have been lost waiting for proper Coalition response. If that's a crime, then I'm guilty." A murmur went through the chamber. Some voices sounded approving. Others were angry. Varen raised one slender hand for silence. "The issue is not that you saved lives, Captain. The issue is how you did it. For 10,000 years, the Coalition has maintained technological standards. Each species contributes their expertise. Each species builds according to established principles. Specialization, purity of design. These are not arbitrary rules. They are the foundation of our power." War leader Garrick of the Krogar stood up. He was massive and scarred, with armor that looked like it had survived 100 battles. His voice was like gravel. "The human ship defeated Ravagers. Multiple Ravagers. Our fleets have struggled against these enemies for years. Perhaps we should be asking how they succeeded, rather than why they broke our precious rules." Varen turned to face the Kroger representative. They succeeded through luck and desperation. Their ship barely survived. The design is unstable and inefficient. But it worked, Garrick insisted. My people respect strength. The humans showed strength. These Bon. But the humans showed strength. A representative from the Vex Collective spoke up, their voice synthesized and emotionless. Our analysis of the battle recordings shows interesting patterns. The human vessel employed tactics that our predictive models did not anticipate. Rapid power redistribution, mixed weapon systems, unpredictable flight patterns. The probability matrices struggled to calculate their behavior. And in reminder, because their behavior was chaotic, Varen replied. Chaos is not a strategy. Jake decided to speak again. With respect, Counselor. Chaos is exactly what worked. The Ravagers have adapted to fight coalition ships. They know how you fight. Because you always fight the same way. Same formations, same tactics, same weapon types. You're predictable. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Lisa touched Jake's arm in warning, but he continued. Humans don't have the luxury of fighting the proper way. We make do with what we have. We improvise. We adapt. Maybe that's not elegant, but it kept people alive. Before Varen could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed in the assembly chamber. A Vex officer rushed to the council platform and spoke urgently to the counselors. Jake could not hear the words, but he saw the expressions change from anger to shock to fear. Varen stood, their composure cracking slightly. This session is suspended. All military personnel report to your vessels immediately. Jake and Lisa exchanged confused looks. A Kroger guard approached them. You must leave now. The station is going to battle stations. What's happening? Lisa asked. The guard hesitated, then spoke quietly. Ravagers. A fleet of them. More than we have ever seen. They are coming here. Jake and Lisa ran back to the Defiance. Ben met them at the airlock, his face pale. Captain, the scopes are showing over 100 Ravager ships incoming. This isn't a raid. This is an invasion. The station transformed around them. Ships began undocking in organized patterns. Coalition military vessels moved to defensive positions. But Jake could see the fear in how they moved. The hesitation. The Ravagers had beaten coalition forces before, and now they were coming in overwhelming numbers. Commander Hayes contacted them from her own ship, a small human destroyer that looked like a toy next to the coalition warships. Jake, I need you to listen carefully. I have authorization from the Grand Assembly for emergency mobilization. I've been building more ships. More ships? Jake repeated. After your fight at the colony, I knew we were onto something. I've been coordinating with human engineers across the frontier. We have 17 vessels now, not as sophisticated as the Defiance, but built on the same principles. Mixed systems. Salvaged components. Human ingenuity. Jake felt something stir in his chest. Where are they? Jumping in now. On the Defiance's view screens, space rippled as ships emerged from jump. They were beautiful in their ugliness. Each one was unique. Built from whatever parts their creators could find. The Liberty, commanded by Ryan Mitchell, was built around salvaged Kroger heavy weapons. The Pioneer, under Nicole Foster, looked fast even standing still. The Ranger, commanded by Carlos Diaz, bristled with electronic warfare equipment. 17 human ships against over 100 Ravagers. It was suicide. But Jake looked at his crew and saw determination rather than fear. They had built something impossible. They had won an unwinnable fight. Maybe they could do it again. The coalition fleet was organizing into standard defensive formations. Cruisers in front, destroyers on the flanks, carriers in the rear. It was textbook military doctrine. It was also exactly what the Ravagers would expect. Jake opened a channel to Commander Hayes. What are our orders? The Grand Assembly has authorized us to operate independently. They want us as a vanguard. Engage the enemy before the main fleet arrives. disrupt their formations. Lisa understood immediately. They're using us as bait, throwing us at the enemy to buy time for the real forces to get in position. IDs. The real forces, probably, Hayes agreed. But it also gives us a chance to prove what human tactics can do. Jake, I'm giving you tactical command of the human fleet. Show them what we're capable of. Jake looked at the 17 ships on his screen. 17 captains who had volunteered for this, knowing it might be suicide. 17 crews who believed that humans could be more than scavengers and survivors. All ships, this is defiance, Jake said over the fleet channel. We're going to do what humans do best. We're going to improvise. No formations. No predictable patterns. Each ship picks their own approach vector. We hit them from every angle at once. Make them confused. Make them afraid. Show them that chaos can defeat order. 2. Ryan Mitchell's voice came back, steady and confident. Defiance. This is liberty. We're ready. The human fleet did not charge in formation. They scattered like seeds in the wind, each ship approaching from a different vector at a different speed. The Ravagers, expecting organized coalition tactics, hesitated for crucial seconds. Their tactical computers tried to calculate intercept patterns, but struggled with 18 separate threats moving unpredictably. Jake felt the Defiance surge forward through the neural link. Space compressed around them as Amy pushed the engines beyond safe limits. He could sense the other ships through the tactical network Ben had created. A web of shared data that showed him everything. Power levels, weapons status, damage reports. 18 ships fighting as one chaotic whole. The Liberty struck first. Ryan Mitchell's ship was built like a hammer, and he used it like one. Heavy Krogar cannons opened fire at maximum range, hurling bolts of superheated plasma across space. The Ravager formation rippled as ships moved to intercept, their adaptive shields already beginning to rotate frequencies to counter the attack. But the Pioneer came in from a completely different angle, moving so fast it was almost a blur. Nicole Foster's ship had been optimized for speed, sacrificing armor for velocity. She swept past 3 Ravager vessels in seconds, her plasma cutters scoring lines across their hulls. The damage was minimal, but it split the enemy's attention. The Ranger followed up with electronic warfare. Carlos Diaz had packed his ship with every jamming and hacking device that human and alien technology could provide. Ravager communications suddenly became chaotic. Their perfect coordination began to fracture. Jake brought the Defiance into range and immediately felt Ravager weapons lock onto them. Green energy beams lanced through space, and he distributed power to shields, feeling each impact like a blow to his chest. The shields held, but barely. Maria's capacitor system was already showing strain. Kevin, mixed fire pattern, Jake ordered. And through the neural link, the weapons responded, before Kevin could even touch his controls. Plasma from Krogar systems, kinetic rounds from human railguns, and electromagnetic pulses from Vex technology, all fired in rapid sequence. The Ravager ship trying to target them suddenly found its adaptive shields confused by the constantly changing attack types. The first Ravager ship died in a flash of light as a kinetic round punched through its failing shields and struck something vital. But 2 more moved to take its place. The human fleet was outnumbered 6-1, and the Ravagers were recovering from their initial surprise. Courage is taking heavy damage, Lisa reported, her voice tight. Shields are down. Hull breaches on multiple decks. Jake saw the data through the tactical network. The Courage, commanded by Frank Morrison, a cousin Jake barely knew, was being overwhelmed by 3 Ravager vessels. He thought about going to help, but the Defiance was engaged with its own enemies. Every human ship was fighting for survival. The Courage's reactor went critical. The explosion was bright enough to hurt Jake's eyes, even through the viewscreen filters. Frank and his entire crew were gone in an instant. The first casualties, but they would not be the last. Freedom is going down, Ben reported from engineering. They've lost main power. The Freedom tried to retreat but was too slow. Ravager weapons tore through its hull like paper. Another 23 human lives extinguished. Jake felt rage building through the neural interface. They were losing. The Ravagers were too many. Too coordinated. Too experienced. Human tactics of chaos and unpredictability were buying time, but not enough. Then Lisa noticed something. Captain, the Ravager fleet maintains tight data connections between all ships. There, in the center of their formation, that larger vessel, I think it's their command ship. Jake pulled up the sensor data. She was right. The ship was larger than the others, and communication streams flowed from it like a spider at the center of a web. It was coordinating the adaptive shield frequencies, sharing tactical data, maintaining their formation cohesion. If we take out that ship, Kevin said slowly, the others lose their coordination advantage. It's protected by at least 30 other vessels, Amy pointed out. We'd never get close. Jake looked at the tactical display. The human fleet had lost 3 ships already, and the rest were taking heavy damage. The Coalition's main fleet was still forming up. Still minutes away. They needed something dramatic, something impossible. All ships. This is Defiance, Jake said over the fleet channel. I need covering fire. Everything you've got. I'm going for the command ship. There was a moment of silence. Then Ryan Mitchell's voice came back. Understood, Defiance. Liberty will cover your approach. One by one, the other captains acknowledged. They understood what Jake was asking. They would sacrifice their ships to give the Defiance a chance. The human fleet converged, and for the first time, they acted in coordination rather than chaos. 14 battered ships moved together, pouring every weapon they had toward a single point in the Ravager formation. It was not elegant or efficient, but it was overwhelming. The Ravagers responded by shifting ships to block the attack, opening a gap in their defensive sphere. Jake pushed the Defiance through that gap. Amy flew like a woman possessed, threading between enemy vessels that fired everything they had. Shields flared and died. Hull plating melted. Alarms screamed throughout the ship, but they kept moving forward, diving deeper into the enemy formation. The Endeavor exploded trying to follow them. The Guardian took a direct hit to its reactor and went silent. The Victory broke apart under concentrated fire. Human ships were dying to create this opportunity, and Jake could not let their sacrifice be meaningless. They reached the command ship. It was massive up close, covered in weapons, and protected by shields that glowed with power. Jake knew immediately that they could not destroy it through conventional attacks. Their weapons were too damaged, their power too depleted. Ben, Jake said through gritted teeth, divert all power, everything, shields, engines, life support. Give it all to weapons. Captain, that will leave us defenseless, Ben protested. I know. Do it. Maria's capacitors began to drain, feeding every remaining joule of energy into the weapon systems. The Defiance went dark except for the weapon arrays, which glowed brighter and brighter. Jake felt vulnerable, exposed, naked in the void. Ravager ships were converging on them. In seconds, they would be destroyed. Fire, Jake thought. And all 6 plasma cannons discharged simultaneously at point-blank range. The combined blast was more powerful than anything the Defiance had ever produced. The Ravager command ship's shields held for half a second before collapsing under the overwhelming energy. The plasma punched through armor, through hull, through whatever systems kept that massive vessel functioning. The command ship's reactor went critical. The explosion was tremendous. It caught the Defiance in its blast wave, hurling the human ship away like a leaf in a storm. Every system went offline. The neural interface burned out, and Jake screamed as the feedback hit his brain. Lisa was thrown from her station. Amy clutched the controls as the ship tumbled end over end. Through the pain, Jake saw what their sacrifice had achieved. The Ravager fleet was in chaos. Without their command ship, the adaptive shields lost coordination. Ships began firing on conflicting frequencies, their perfect tactical unity shattered. And then, the Coalition fleet arrived. Dozens of warships, led by war leader Garrick's personal flagship, tore into the confused Ravager formation. Without their advantages of coordination and adaptive defense, the Ravagers were just ships. Fast ships, Deadly ships, but ships that could be fought and beaten. The battle turned. Ravager vessels began retreating, breaking formation, fleeing into deep space. The coalition forces pursued, and what had been an invasion became a rout. The Defiance drifted through space, powerless and broken. Life support was failing. Fires burned in sections they could not reach. But they were alive. Barely. Status report, Jake croaked, his head pounding from the neural interface feedback. Ben's voice came through, weak but present. We have emergency power only. Main reactor is offline. Hull breaches on every deck. We're alive, Captain, but this ship won't fly again without major repairs. The fleet? Lisa pulled up what data she could. 9 human ships survived. 9 out of 18. Jake closed his eyes. Half their fleet gone. Hundreds of humans dead. But they had stopped an invasion. They had turned the tide. A coalition cruiser approached, its tractor beam gently pulling the Defiance toward its hangar bay. War Leader Garrick's voice came over the communication channel, speaking directly to Jake. Human Captain. Your tactics were chaos. Your ships are inferior. Your losses were heavy. There was a pause. But you achieved victory through innovation and courage. The Krogar recognized strength. You have proven yourself strong. Over the following hours, rescue ships pulled survivors from the damaged human vessels. The dead were recovered with honor. Commander Hayes contacted Jake, her face showing pride and grief mixed together. The Grand Assembly is reconvening, she said. But this time, they won't be questioning our right to build ships. They'll be asking how soon we can build more. Crime. Crime. Jake stood on what remained of the Defiance's bridge, looking at the scorched panels and twisted metal. This ship had been built from scraps. It had been called ugly and inefficient and impossible. But it had fought when fighting mattered. It had led when leadership was needed. The Etherians could keep their elegant designs. The Krogar could keep their specialized warships. The Vex could keep their perfect efficiency. Humanity had proven something more valuable than any of those things. They had proven that innovation born from necessity could match technology born from abundance. That chaos could defeat order. That the discarded and forgotten could become unstoppable. 3 days later, Jake stood before the Grand Assembly again. This time, he was not accused. He was honored. Counselor Varen personally presented him with a medal. Though the Etherian's expression suggested the gesture was painful. The Coalition recognizes the value of human tactical innovation, Varen said formally. Restrictions on human military development are lifted. Your species is granted full partnership status, and your fleet will be designated as an independent force operating under human command, integrated into Coalition defense structure. War Leader Garrick stood and spoke in his gravelly voice. We will call them the Vanguard, the first to fight, the first to face danger. A position of honor for those who have earned it. The human fleet, or what remained of it, was officially renamed the Vanguard Fleet. Jake was promoted to Admiral, though he privately thought that was ridiculous for someone commanding 9 battered ships. Commander Hayes became Fleet Admiral, overseeing humanity's expanding military presence. But the real work was just beginning. Human engineers and Coalition specialists began working together, sharing knowledge freely. New ships were designed that combined the best of both approaches. Coalition precision and human improvisation, alien technology and human adaptability. 5 years passed. The Vanguard fleet grew to over 50 vessels, crewed by humans and aliens, who had learned that mixing different perspectives created something stronger than either alone. Jake commanded from a new ship called Defiance II, built to honor the vessel that had started everything. Ben Carter ran the Integration Technology Institute, teaching engineers from across the galaxy how to think outside their cultural limitations. Lisa served as the diplomatic liaison between humanity and dozens of Coalition species. Amy trained a new generation of pilots who flew by instinct as much as by instruments. The Ravagers returned occasionally, testing defenses and probing for weakness. Each encounter taught both sides new lessons. The galaxy was changing, and humanity stood at the front of that change. No longer as grateful recipients of charity, but as equals who had earned their place through fire and determination. New Providence Station expanded into one of the Coalition's major hubs. Ships from hundreds of species docked there now, coming to see the place where humans had proven that scrap could become something magnificent. Jake stood on the observation deck one evening, watching ships come and go. A young ensign approached him nervously. "Admiral Morrison, I wanted to ask, how did you know it would work? Building ships from salvage and using chaos as a tactic?" Jake smiled. "I didn't know. None of us did. But humanity has always been good at one thing: making do with what we have. The Coalition gave us their scraps, thinking we'd stay grateful and small. Instead, we showed them what scraps could become in the right hands." The ensign nodded and left. Jake returned to watching the ships. The Vanguard vessels still looked strange compared to pure Coalition designs. Mismatched hulls, mixed systems, visible repairs, but they flew faster and hit harder than ships twice their size. From scrap they gave us rose humanity's most unstoppable vanguard of the stars. And that was only the beginning of the story. Nicole Foster added, "Pioneer confirms. Let's show these aliens what scrap can do." One by one, the other captains acknowledged. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. These people were trusting him, following him, ready to die if necessary. The Ravager fleet appeared at the edge of sensor range. Over 100 ships, moving in perfect coordination. They were beautiful in a terrible way. Sleek and deadly, they had terrorized Coalition space for years, and now they were coming to make a statement. To prove that the Coalition was weak, Jake connected to the neural interface, feeling the defiance come alive around him. He thought of the Tellurian colonists they had saved. He thought of every human who had been told they were inferior, that they should be grateful for scraps, that they would never be equals. "All ships," he said quietly, "attack." And 18 human vessels, built from garbage and held together by determination, charged into the largest battle the Coalition had seen in a generation. The Tellurian colony sent a message of thanks, their relief obvious even through the translation software. They had been preparing to die. Instead, they lived, saved by a ship that should not exist, crewed by humans who refused to accept limitations. As the Defiance limped back toward New Providence Station, Jake sat in his chair and thought about what they had just done. They had defeated Ravager ships that had troubled Coalition forces for years. They had done it with salvage and improvisation and sheer stubborn determination. Commander Hayes was waiting when they docked. Her expression was complicated, pride and worry mixed together. "You saved those people," she said. "But you also got noticed. The Coalition monitored the battle. They want to see the Defiance. They want to see you." Jake nodded slowly. He had expected this. You do not build something impossible and use it to win an impossible fight without drawing attention. "When do we leave?" he asked. 3 days, Hayes replied. "They want you at Coalition Central Station. The Grand Assembly is convening." Lisa came to stand beside Jake. "Is that a court-martial or a medal ceremony?" Hayes smiled grimly. "Probably both." The name fit. Every bolt, every wire, every system in the ship was an act of defiance against the idea that humans were lesser, that they should be satisfied with scraps, that they could not build something powerful from what others had thrown away. 8 months after they began, the ship was complete. It sat in the hangar bay, looking like nothing else in Coalition space. Engineers from the station came to stare at it, some with admiration, others with horror at the violations of proper design principles. Ben stood beside Jake, both of them looking up at their creation. "Think she'll fly?" Ben asked. "Only one way to find out," Jake replied. Commander Hayes authorized a shakedown cruise. Just a short trip. Test the systems, see what breaks. Come back and fix it. Simple and safe. But space has never been safe for anyone, especially not for humans who dared to build something new from the pieces they were given. Sea systems, they're all damaged, but they're functional. If we could find a way to make them work together. That's illegal under coalition law, Patricia interrupted, but she was smiling slightly. Building military vessels without proper authorization. Mixing technologies without manufacturer approval. Technically, we're just testing salvaged equipment, Jake said carefully, seeing if it still works. Patricia looked at them both for a long moment. Then she nodded. I'll authorize a classified project. Experimental only. We're testing the viability of recovered systems for potential future use. Jake felt something stir in his chest. Hope. Maybe. Or defiance. Humanity had been given scraps for 30 years. Maybe it was time to show the galaxy what humans could do with scraps. We'll need a crew, Ben said. Engineers who understand alien systems. People who can think outside the box. I know just the people, Patricia replied. Let's see what we can build.